The night my ex-wife stood up on live television and confessed she helped burn my $500 million company to the ground, everyone thought I had lost everything. What they did not know was that the building she torched had not been mine for years. That fire was the key my father left behind to expose the man bleeding us dry. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, my ex, her husband, and their puppet master were all in handcuffs. My name is Caroline Williams, and at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, I was gripping the edge of a mahogany conference table so hard my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Aurora Flux Systems headquarters, Seattle was doing what it did best. A gray, relentless drizzle blurred the skyline, turning the Space Needle into a ghostly sketch against a backdrop of charcoal clouds. Inside, the atmosphere was even colder. I stood at the head of the table, the place where my father, Richard Williams, had sat for 30 years. The leather chair behind me was empty, pushed back slightly, a silent monument to the man who had built this empire from a garage in Tacoma to a valuation of $500 million. Now, that chair was a void I was expected to fill. The restructuring plan focuses on 3 core verticals, I said, my voice projecting a steadiness I did not feel. I clicked the remote in my hand, and the slide on the massive screen shifted. Charts, projections, a roadmap to survival. We need to trim the fat from the logistics division and reinvest 30% of our liquid capital into the new solid-state battery prototypes. It is aggressive, yes, but it is the only way to secure the next 2 quarters. I paused, scanning the faces of the 12 men and women sitting around the table, the board of directors. They looked back at me with a mixture of pity and predatory skepticism. To them, I was not the new CEO. I was Richard's grieving daughter. I was the art history major who had been forced into the family business. I was emotional. I could see it in the way Gerald Brock, the longest-serving member, tapped his gold pen against his notepad. He was not taking notes. He was waiting for me to crack. "Caroline," Gerald began, his voice dripping with a patronizing softness that made my skin crawl. "We all appreciate your passion. Your father had a vision, certainly, but liquidating logistics assets right now. In this market, it feels impulsive. Perhaps we should pause and let the interim committee handle the day-to-day operations until you have had time to properly mourn." There it was, the polite coup. They wanted me to go away, take a sabbatical, cry on a beach somewhere while they carved up my father's life's work. I straightened my spine, fighting the urge to cross my arms. Body language was everything. "I am done mourning, Gerald, and I am not asking for permission to save this company. I am telling you how we are going to do it. If we do not pivot by the 3rd quarter, our competitors will eat us alive. We are bleeding cash in the Tacoma facility, and you know it." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that sounded like a held breath. I had them. Just for a second, I saw a flicker of respect in the eyes of the CFO. I was about to press my advantage, to move to the next slide, when the sound of the double doors crashing open shattered the room's tension like a hammer hitting glass. Every head turned. It was not a polite entrance. It was a breach. Vanessa Keene walked in. My ex-wife looked like she had just stepped off a runway, or perhaps out of a war zone where she was the only survivor. She wore a crimson trench coat that was belted tight at the waist, contrasting violently with the muted grays and blues of the boardroom. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with the rhythm of a ticking clock. Click, 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 behind her, looking like a well-groomed show dog, was Colton Reed, her new husband. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, and his face held that infuriating, glossy smile of a man who thinks he has already won the lottery. "Security," I said, my voice dropping an octave. I did not shout. I did not scream. I just stared at her. "Get them out. Now." "Sit down, Caroline," Vanessa said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to the back of the room, sharp and clear. She did not look at the security guard who had taken a hesitant step forward. She kept her eyes locked on mine. We are not crashing. We are major stakeholders. A murmur rippled through the board members. Gerald Brock stopped tapping his pen. You are trespassing, I said, leaning forward, my palms flat on the cold glass of the table. You have no business here. You have no shares. You have nothing. Vanessa laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She reached into her oversized designer bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She tossed it onto the center of the conference table. It slid across the polished surface, spinning slightly, before coming to a stop directly in front of Gerald. Read it, she commanded, then looked back at me. We are here for half. Caroline, half of Aurora Flux, half of your $500 million empire, half of every patent, every building, and every dollar in the bank. The room erupted. 3 directors stood up at once. The CFO looked like he was about to swallow his tongue. This is preposterous, Gerald sputtered, though I noticed his hand was shaking slightly as he reached for the folder. Is it? Colton stepped forward now, placing a protective hand on Vanessa's shoulder. He played the role of the devoted, outraged husband perfectly. Richard Williams was a man of his word. Was he not? Everyone in this room knew him. He sat right there. Colton pointed to the empty chair behind me. And 2 years ago, in front of witnesses, he made a verbal agreement with my wife. He promised her that her contributions to the early marketing strategies of this company would be compensated. He called it her equity insurance. I felt the blood drain from my face. That is a lie, I said. My father despised you, Vanessa. He wouldn't have promised you a parking spot, let alone equity. He promised me security, Vanessa snapped, her mask of cool detachment slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal the greed underneath. He knew what I did for this family. He knew what I put up with. He gave me assurances. Caroline, assurances you were too busy playing artist to hear about. Colton nodded solemnly, addressing the board now, ignoring me completely. We have affidavits. We have timelines. Richard was clear. 50% of his personal holdings were to be transferred to Vanessa upon his death as a deferred compensation package. We are just here to collect what is owed before you drive this company into the ground. I looked around the room. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. The board members were exchanging glances. Fear. That was the dominant emotion. They were not looking at the legal absurdity of the claim. They were looking at the potential for a public relations nightmare. A messy lawsuit, a contested will, a scandal that would tank the stock price before the market even opened the next day. This is blackmail, I said. My voice sounded thin in my own ears. You have no signature. You have no contract. Verbal contracts are binding in the state of Washington under specific circumstances, Colton said smoothly. He was reciting a script. I could hear the rehearsal in his cadence. And with the witnesses we have lined up well. Let us just say a jury will find Richard's sudden change of heart very interesting. I looked at the folder on the table. It was thick, too thick to be empty. What had they forged? What twisted version of history had they concocted? But then, a darker thought wormed its way into my mind, a thought I tried to crush instantly but failed. What if I didn't know everything? My father had been secretive in his final years. There were closed-door meetings, phone calls he took out on the balcony. He had warned me about wolves, yes, but had he also made deals with them to keep them at bay? Had he promised Vanessa money to keep her away from me, and now she was twisting that hush money into an ownership stake? No. I could not let them see me doubt. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and expensive cologne. I walked around the head of the table, moving until I was standing directly in front of Vanessa. She was taller than me in those heels, but I did not back down. Get out, I said. We want a settlement. Caroline, Vanessa hissed, her voice low enough that only the people closest to us could hear. Give us the liquid assets from the Tacoma sale and a board seat, and we go away. Fight us, and we burn the reputation of this company to ash. You are bluffing, I said. Try me. Her eyes were hard, dark stones. I turned to the security guard who was hovering by the door, looking terrified. Escort Mr. Reed and Ms. Keene out of the building. If they resist, call the police and have them arrested for corporate espionage and trespassing. I want their photos at the front desk within 10 minutes. They are permanently banned from the premises. I turned back to the room, sweeping my gaze over the stunned directors. There is no agreement. There is no verbal contract. My father built this company with iron and blood, not whispers and handouts. These two will not receive a single cent. Not now. Not ever. You are making a mistake, Caroline, Colton warned, his smug smile faltering for the first time. The only mistake, I said, was letting you in here. Security finally moved. 2 guards stepped forward, taking Vanessa and Colton by the arms. They did not struggle physically, but the air in the room seemed to warp around them. Vanessa shook off the guard's hand, adjusting her coat with a sharp, violent motion. She looked at me one last time. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked amused. It was a look that sent a spike of pure adrenaline straight into my heart. She leaned in, ignoring the personal space I had tried to establish. Her breath smelled of peppermint and something metallic. You feel big right now, don't you? She whispered. It was loud enough for Gerald and the CFO to hear. You think you are protecting Daddy's legacy, but you have no idea what is coming. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. By tomorrow morning, she said, enunciating every syllable, you will have nothing left to keep, no company, no name, nothing. Then she smiled. Let's go, Colton. They turned and walked out, the guards trailing them like an honor guard for the damned. The heavy doors swung shut, sealing us back inside the hermetic silence of the boardroom. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The slide on the screen behind me flickered a graph showing projected growth, and it looked like a cruel joke. Caroline, Gerald said, and his voice was no longer patronizing. It was cold. If there is any truth to what they said, any truth at all, we need to know. Now, before the shareholders find out. There isn't, I said, but my voice trembled. I looked down at the table. The words on my notepad were blurring. Restructuring, logistics, battery tech, none of it made sense anymore. My brain was stuck on Vanessa's parting words. By tomorrow morning, it wasn't a threat of a lawsuit. Lawyers took months. Courts took years. Tomorrow morning was immediate. Tomorrow morning was violence. Meeting adjourned, I said abruptly. I grabbed my laptop, not bothering to close it properly, and walked out the side door before anyone could ask me another question. I couldn't look at them. I couldn't let them see that beneath the CEO facade, I was a daughter who suddenly didn't know if she knew her father at all. I took the private elevator down to the garage, bypassing the lobby. I needed air. I needed to breathe. I drove my car out of the underground structure and into the Seattle downpour. The rain hammered against the windshield, distorting the world into streaks of gray and neon. I didn't go home immediately. I pulled over on a side street near the waterfront, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. I watched the wipers slice back and forth. Swish, swish, swish. Why did she look so confident Vanessa was a narcissist? Yes, and a manipulator. But she was not stupid. She wouldn't storm a board meeting with a lie that could be disproven in 5 minutes unless she had something else. The folder she left behind Lydia, our family lawyer, would have to look at it. But I already suspected it was a distraction. A magic trick. Look at this hand while the other one holds the knife. By tomorrow morning, a chill that had nothing to do with the damp Pacific Northwest air settled deep in my marrow. I felt like a soldier standing on a battlefield who had just realized she brought a knife to a drone strike. I had won the argument in the boardroom, but as I sat there in the dark, watching the city lights bleed through the rain, I had the sinking, nauseating realization that I had just lost a battle I didn't even know had started, and whatever was coming with the sunrise, I was not ready for it. The ferry ride across Puget Sound usually acted as a decompression chamber for me. 35 minutes of dark water and cold salt air to strip away the armor of the CEO and let the daughter breathe again. But tonight, the black waves churning against the hull only mirrored the turmoil in my stomach. The ferry was nearly empty at 11:30 at night, just a few tired commuters and the low hum of the engines vibrating through the metal bench I sat on. I drove my car off the ramp onto Bainbridge Island, the tires humming against the wet asphalt. The rain here was different from the city. In Seattle, it was industrial, gray, and unrelenting. Here, filtered through the towering Douglas firs and ancient cedars, it felt primitive. The road to the estate wound through the forest like a secret vein, narrow and slick with wet leaves. When the house finally loomed out of the mist, it looked less like a home and more like a fortress that had lost its commander. It was a sprawling craftsman structure of stone and timber that my father, Richard Williams, had built when Aurora Flux was just beginning to make its first 10 million. Now, the windows were dark, staring back at me like hollow eyes. I parked the car but didn't get out immediately. I sat there, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, the windshield wipers silenced, leaving the rain to blur the world into impressionistic smears. Vanessa's voice was still ringing in my ears. By tomorrow morning, I unlocked the heavy oak front door and stepped inside. The silence of the house hit me harder than the cold. It was a dense, preserved silence. Since my father collapsed 4 months ago, I had not had the heart to move anything. His trench coat still hung on the rack by the door, the left sleeve slightly inside out where he had pulled his arm through in a hurry. On the entryway table, a receipt from the hardware store sat under a layer of fine dust, next to a half-finished cup of coffee that had long since evaporated into a brown ring of ceramic stain. The air smelled of him. It was a scent of old paper, damp wool, and the faint, lingering spice of the sandalwood cologne he had worn for 40 years. It was so visceral that for a split second, I expected him to walk out of the library, reading glasses perched on his forehead, asking me how the board meeting went, but the hallway remained empty. I walked through the living room, my heels clicking too loudly on the hardwood, a jarring intrusion in a house that seemed to be holding its breath. I needed to think, but the walls of the main house felt like they were closing in on me. I needed the one place where the air felt alive. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and headed out the back door, crossing the wet lawn to the greenhouse. This was my father's cathedral. While he built technology that powered cities, his soul had always been here, among the roots and the soil. I pushed the glass door open and was instantly enveloped by the warm, humid breath of the earth. The smell was intense wet loam, crushing greenery, and the sweet, heavy perfume of blooming jasmine. I clicked on the string of amber lights he had strung along the ceiling. They flickered once before bathing the space in a low golden glow. Rows of orchids, ferns, and rare tropicals stretched out before me. He had known the Latin name of every single one. I walked down the center aisle, trailing my fingers over the leaves of a monstera. I used to hide here when I was a child, crouching under the potting benches while my parents argued about money, about time, about the things that eventually drove my mother away. My hand brushed against a terracotta pot on the far bench, his favorite cymbidium orchid. It was thriving, its petals a deep, violent purple. But something was wrong with the arrangement. The pot was slightly askew, not perfectly centered on its saucer like my father. A man of military precision would have left it. I lifted the pot. Underneath, resting in the dry saucer, was a thick envelope. It was yellowing, the corners slightly bent. I set the pot down, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that had nothing to do with the exertion. I picked up the envelope. On the front, in my father's jagged, assertive handwriting, were the words, "Caroline, open when the wolves start circling." My breath hitched. He knew. Somehow, he had known this day would come. I sat down on the overturned bucket he used as a stool. The rain drummed a frantic tattoo on the glass roof above me, thousands of fingers tapping, demanding to be let in. My hands trembled as I tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of heavy bond paper and a small brass key. I unfolded the letter. The date at the top was from 6 months ago, 2 months before he died. "Caroline, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the sharks smell blood in the water. I built Aurora Flux to last, but I built it on a foundation of difficult choices, and choices have consequences that outlive the chooser. There are things about the company structure I could not tell you while I was alive, not because I didn't trust your ability, but because your conscience is cleaner than mine, and I needed to keep it that way for as long as possible. But now, you need armor more than you need innocence. There is a storm coming. It will start with legal threats. Then it will get personal. They will try to take the legacy apart piece by piece. Take the key. Go to the wall safe in my study. I have left you the ammunition you will need. And Caroline, this is the hardest part. You have a good heart. You want to see the best in people. But right now, you cannot afford that luxury. Trust no one. Verify everything. Do not trust the board. Do not trust the lawyers. Do not trust Evan. I stopped reading. The words blurred, swimming in front of my eyes. Do not trust Evan, my brother, my little brother, the boy I had protected when our mother left, the man who had stood beside me at the funeral, his shoulders shaking as he wept. I reread the line, hoping I had misunderstood. Do not trust Evan. A cold nausea curled in my gut. I thought back to the last few months. Evan had been distant. Yes, he had missed Sunday dinners. He had been taking long trips to Portland for consulting work that he never fully explained. I had chalked it up to grief, to him processing the loss in his own way. But now, under the amber lights of the greenhouse, those memories took on a sinister shading. The way he avoided eye contact when I talked about the restructuring, the way he had argued against selling the logistics division, claiming it had sentimental value. Was he working with them? Was my own brother one of the wolves? I shoved the letter into my pocket, gripping the small brass key so hard the metal bit into my palm. I needed to see what was in that safe. I ran back to the house, ignoring the rain soaking through my blouse. I burst into the study, a room lined with dark walnut bookshelves and smelling of old leather. The painting of the storm-tossed ship on the far wall hid the safe. I had not opened it since he died. I didn't have the combination, and the lawyers had said we would deal with it during the final asset valuation. But this key was not for the digital keypad. It was for a manual override, a small keyhole hidden under the brand plate of the safe door, something I hadn't even known existed. I slid the painting aside. I inserted the brass key and turned it. There was a heavy mechanical clunk, and the door swung open. It wasn't full of cash or gold bars. It was full of information. I pulled out a stack of items. A black solid-state drive, a silver USB stick, a stack of photographs printed on high-gloss paper, and a sheaf of financial documents clipped together. I spread them out on my father's desk, turning on the green-shaded banker's lamp. The pool of light illuminated the evidence of a life I didn't recognize. I picked up the photographs first. They were surveillance shots, grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. The first one showed Vanessa. She was sitting at a booth in a dimly lit bar. I recognized the establishment, the White Eagle in Portland, a place known for its dark corners and discretion. She was leaning forward, laughing, her hand resting on the arm of a man sitting across from her. The man's face was turned away from the camera, obscured by shadow and the angle of the shot. But I froze. I knew that posture. I knew the way he held his shoulders, stiff and military straight. I recognized the suit, a charcoal gray bespoke cut that cost more than most people made in a year. I had seen that suit before. I had seen that posture in hallways, in galas, in the background of my life for years. It wasn't Evan. It was someone older, someone powerful. The puppet master my father had warned me about. I put the photo down, my fingers numb. I reached for the financial documents. They were deed transfers and asset liquidation reports. My eyes scanned the dense legal jargon, looking for the anomaly, and then I found it. It was a bill of sale. Asset Aurora Flux Manufacturing Facility B, Tacoma Sector 4. Date of sale, August 14th, 2 years ago. Buyer Obsidian Logistics, LLC. Status closed. I stared at the paper. The Tacoma facility. The one Vanessa had threatened. The one the board was worried about. The one I thought we still owned and were bleeding money on. My father had sold it 2 years ago. If Aurora Flux didn't own the building, Why was I paying maintenance costs on it? I flipped to the next page. The maintenance payments weren't going to a facilities management company. They were going to a shell corporation that routed back to I stopped. The trail on the paper ended there. But the implication was a sledgehammer. Vanessa and Colton had threatened to burn my company down, Vanessa had said. By tomorrow morning, you will have nothing. But if they burned down the Tacoma factory, they wouldn't be burning an Aurora Flux asset. They would be burning a building owned by a third party. My father had set a trap. He had sold the building but kept it on the books as a decoy, a lightning rod to draw fire. But why? And why tell me not to trust Evan? I looked at the photo of Vanessa and the mystery man again. Then I looked at the date on the sale document. 2 years ago. That was right around the time Evan had started asking for more responsibility in the logistics division. The puzzle pieces were jagged, sharp, and they didn't fit together yet. But the picture they were forming was terrifying. My father hadn't just left me a company. He had left me a minefield, and he had handed me the map 5 minutes before the explosion. I looked out the window. The rain was coming down harder now, thrashing against the glass. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was preparing her match. Somewhere out there, my brother was sleeping or plotting, and I was alone in a dead man's study, holding the proof that everything I thought I knew about my family and my fortune was a lie. I picked up the phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't call the board. I looked at the SSD drive. If the paper documents were the map, this drive was the weapon. I needed to see what was on it before the sun came up, because if Vanessa was right, by morning, the world would be on fire, and I needed to be the one holding the extinguisher, or perhaps the gasoline. I sat down in my father's chair. It creaked, a familiar, comforting sound in the silent house. "Okay, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what you really did." The phone buzzed against the wood of the nightstand, a harsh, insect sound that sliced through the dead silence of 3 a.m. It was not a ring, it was a vibration, repetitive and angry. I clawed my way out of a fitful sleep, my heart already hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs before I even touched the device. My hand fumbled in the dark. Knocking over a glass of water, the crash of breaking glass was loud, but the glowing screen of the phone was louder. One new message. Sender Vanessa. I swiped the screen, the blue light stinging my eyes. The text was short, brutal, and punctuated with a smiling emoji that looked demonic in the context. "We just burned your company down. Hope you like the fireworks." The air left my lungs. It was a physical blow, as if someone had swung a sledgehammer into my stomach. I fell out of bed, my knees hitting the floor, tangling in the sheets. The world tilted on its axis, burned. The word echoed in my skull. I closed my eyes and saw it instantly. The Tacoma facility, the cradle of Aurora Flux. I saw the labs where my father and I had tested the first conductive polymers. I saw the archives room filled with 30 years of blueprints. I saw the server farm in the basement, all of it, ash. I did not think. I moved on pure, animal instinct. I grabbed a pair of jeans from the chair, pulling them on over my pajama bottoms. I shoved my feet into boots without tying the laces. I grabbed my keys and my phone, ignoring the coat rack, ignoring the cold, ignoring everything but the screaming need to see it. I tore out of the driveway, the gravel spraying like buckshot against the undercarriage of the SUV. The rain had turned into a deluge, a curtain of water that the headlights could barely penetrate. I hit the main road and floored the accelerator. The engine roared, a mechanical scream that matched the panic rising in my throat. I had to get off Bainbridge Island. I had to get to the bridge. The drive was a blur of adrenaline and terror. I took the corners of the winding forest roads too fast, the tires hydroplaning for terrifying split seconds before gripping the asphalt again. The GPS voice was calm, robotic, reciting directions I knew by heart, offering a surreal counterpoint to my heavy breathing. "In 2 miles, merge onto Highway 3 South." "Shut up," I whispered, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned. "Just shut up." I crossed the Agate Pass Bridge, the water below invisible in the blackness, and hit the highway toward Tacoma. The speedometer climbed. 70, 80, 90. I was flying past semi-trucks, their spray coating my windshield in temporary blindness. My mind was racing faster than the car, Vanessa told me. She said by tomorrow morning I would have nothing. I thought it was a lawsuit. I thought it was a corporate takeover. I never imagined she would resort to this. This was not white-collar crime. This was war. This was insanity. As I neared the industrial district of Tacoma, I saw it. It started as a dull, pulsating orange glow on the horizon, staining the low-hanging clouds. It looked like a false sunrise, violent and misplaced in the western sky. My stomach churned. It was real. I exited the highway, the smell hitting me before the heat. It was the acrid, chemical stench of burning plastic, melting metal, and accelerant. It filled the car cabin even with the windows up. I turned the final corner onto the access road and slammed on the brakes. The sky was gone. It was replaced by a towering pillar of black smoke, illuminated from below by flames that licked 100 feet into the air. The heat radiated through the glass of the windshield, pressing against my face. It was an inferno. Police lights flashed blue and red, a chaotic disco against the orange backdrop. Fire trucks were positioned like siege engines, their water cannons blasting futile streams into the heart of the beast. I threw the car into park and scrambled out. The noise was deafening. It was not just the roar of the fire, which sounded like a jet engine taking off, but the structural groans of steel twisting and concrete cracking. "No!" I screamed, the sound torn from my throat, lost immediately in the cacophony. "No! No! No!" I ran toward the police barricade. The rain was sizzling as it hit the pavement near the fire, turning to steam. I pushed past a stunned security guard from a neighboring building. "Hey, lady, get back," a voice shouted. I ignored it. I needed to get closer. I needed to see if anything could be saved. I remembered being 6 years old, holding my father's hand as we walked through these doors. He had shown me the assembly line. He had lifted me up to press the button that started the conveyor belt. "This is our future, Caroline," he had said. "This is what feeds us." Now, the roof was caving in. A massive section of the metal structure groaned and collapsed inward with a sound like a bomb going off, sending a shower of sparks spiraling into the night sky. A strong hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back. "You cannot be here. Ma'am, it is not safe." I spun around. It was a police officer, his face smeared with soot, his eyes wide. "That is my company," I screamed at him, pointing at the burning skeleton of the building. "That is Aurora Flux. My father built that." The officer looked at me, then looked back at the building, then back at me. He frowned. "Aurora Flux," he shouted over the roar of the flames. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "Of course I am sure. I am the CEO." I was shaking, tears mixing with the rain on my face. "My labs, my servers." The officer shook his head. He pulled me further back, behind the yellow tape. "Ma'am, calm down. Nobody was inside. The building has been vacant for months." "Vacant?" I stared at him. "No, we have 20 technicians on the night shift. We have—" I stopped. I looked past the officer's shoulder. The wind shifted, blowing the smoke aside for a brief second. The entrance gate, usually pristine and silver, was twisted and blackened, but the metal sign welded to the top arch was still visible against the backlight of the fire. I squinted, wiping the water from my eyes. It did not say Aurora Flux Systems. The font was different, blocky, industrial, Obsidian Logistics. I froze. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the fire faded into a dull hum. I blinked, thinking I was hallucinating. I looked again. Obsidian Logistics. I turned my head, scanning the layout of the burning building. In my panic, I had only seen fire. Now, I saw the structure. The loading docks were on the wrong side. The office annex that should have been on the east wing was missing entirely. This was the Tacoma facility. It was the right address. It was the building I had visited 1,000 times as a child. But it was not my building, not anymore. The memory of the document in the safe crashed into my mind. Sold. August 14th, 2 years ago. My father had sold this place. He had sold the physical structure, the walls, the roof, the land. He had moved the operations. I remembered now vague mentions of efficiency relocations in board meetings I had tuned out 2 years ago because I was too busy focusing on the art foundation. I had assumed they just renovated. They had moved. This building was an empty shell, a ghost. Who owns this? I grabbed the officer's vest. Who owns this building? Like I said, ma'am, the officer shouted, looking at me like I was insane. Obsidian Logistics, some holding company. It has been sitting empty, waiting for a remodel. We suspect arson, obviously. I let go of his vest. I took a step back. I wasn't looking at the death of my company. I was looking at a bonfire, a very expensive, very illegal bonfire of a building that belonged to a shell corporation my father had likely set up for exactly this purpose. My pocket buzzed again. I pulled my phone out. My hands were still shaking, but the rhythm had changed. It was no longer the shake of terror. It was the vibration of a machine coming online. Another message from Vanessa. This time, a video file. I pressed play. The screen lit up. The camera was shaky at first, then steadied. It was a selfie mode video. Vanessa filled the frame. Her hair was windblown, her eyes wild with adrenaline and triumph. Behind her, the orange glow of the fire was unmistakable. "Say goodbye, Caroline," she screamed into the camera, her voice distorted by the wind and the crackle of the flames. She laughed, a high, manic sound. She panned the camera to the left. Colton was there. He was holding a gas can, looking at the fire with a look of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. He waved at the lens. "That is what you get," Colton shouted. 50%. No. We took it all. It is gone. Caroline, it is all gone." Vanessa pulled the camera back to herself. "This is the end of Aurora Flux, and it is the end of you. We win." The video cut to black. I stood there in the rain, the water soaking through my shirt, chilling my skin. But I didn't feel cold. I felt heat. But it wasn't from the fire. They had filmed it. They were so arrogant, so drunk on their own perceived victory, that they had filmed themselves committing a felony. They believed so thoroughly that they were destroying me that they needed me to see it. They needed to gloat. They thought they had burned down a $500 million company. Instead, they had burned down a decoy, an empty warehouse owned by a separate legal entity. I looked at the phone in my hand. I hit save. Then I hit back up to cloud. Then I forwarded it to a hidden folder. I looked up at the burning building. The roof finally gave way completely, collapsing into the center of the structure with a thunderous crash that shook the ground beneath my feet. The sparks flew up, joining the stars. It was beautiful. For the first time that night, my heart rate slowed. The panic that had been strangling me released its grip. I took a deep breath, tasting the smoke. It didn't taste like loss anymore. It tasted like victory. My father's letter whispered in my mind. Open when the wolves start circling. He knew. He knew Vanessa's greed. He knew Colton's stupidity. He knew that if they couldn't have the company, they would try to destroy it, and he had given them a target, a scarecrow. They had taken the bait. They had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. I watched the flames dance. Vanessa and Colton were probably popping champagne right now, thinking they had left me destitute. They were celebrating their crime, unaware that they had just handed me the keys to their own prison cells. I was not the victim standing in the rain. I was the executioner waiting for the guillotine to drop. I turned away from the fire. I didn't need to speak to the police yet. Not now. I needed to go back to Seattle. I needed to find Evan. I needed to prepare. Because if they thought this was the finale, they were dead wrong. This was just the opening act. I walked back to my car, my steps steady on the wet pavement. I didn't run. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and looked at the burning horizon one last time in the rearview mirror. "Hope you like the fireworks," I whispered to the empty car, repeating Vanessa's words. I put the car in gear. Oh, Vanessa. I love them. The first light of dawn did not bring warmth. It only brought a cruel, high-definition clarity to the crime scene I had assembled on the potting bench. I was back in the greenhouse. The humidity that usually felt like an embrace now felt suffocating, heavy with the scent of damp earth and accusations. I had not slept. The adrenaline from the fire at the Tacoma facility had burned off hours ago, leaving behind a cold, vibrating exhaustion that made my hands shake as I arranged the evidence. The black SSD drive, the silver USB stick, the financial records of the shell company, and the photographs. I spread them out like tarot cards predicting a violent death. In the center, I placed the picture that had been gnawing at my sanity for the last 4 hours. It was not the photo of the mysterious man in the suit. It was the other one. The one I had found clipped to the back of a bank statement. It was a grainy surveillance shot taken through the window of a coffee shop in the Pearl District of Portland. 2 people were sitting at a small round table. One was Vanessa, looking animated, her hand gesturing in the air. The other person was my brother, Evan. The sound of the greenhouse door sliding open cut through the silence. I did not look up. I knew his footsteps. I knew the hesitation in his gait. Caroline. His voice was rough, like he had been swallowing gravel. I saw the news about the fire. I came as soon as I could. Are you okay? I stared at the photograph. In the picture, Evan was smiling. It was a small, tight smile, but it was there. He was sitting across from the woman who had just tried to burn our legacy to the ground, and he was smiling at her. Come here, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. Evan walked down the center aisle, brushing past the hanging ferns. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and there were dark, purple bruises of exhaustion under his eyes. He looked like a man who was being hunted. I tried calling you, he said, stopping at the edge of the bench. When I saw the footage of the Flames God, Caroline, the servers, the archives. Is it all gone? It does not matter, I said, finally looking up at him. The building was a decoy. Dad sold it 2 years ago. Evan blinked. What? He knew, I said. He knew they would come for it, just like he knew other things. I picked up the photograph and flicked it across the wooden slats. It landed in front of him, face up. Explain this. Evan looked down. He didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He just stared at the image of himself and Vanessa, and his shoulders slumped forward as if the strings holding him up had finally been cut. You have been busy, Evan, I said, the venom leaking into my tone. Portland, the long weekends, the consulting gigs, you were with her. He let out a long, ragged sigh. Caroline, please. Did you know, I demanded, stepping around the bench to get in his face. Did you know she was going to burn the warehouse? Did you help her plan it? Is that why you were smiling in that picture? Were you discussing how to split the ashes? No, Evan said. It is not what you think. My father left me a letter, I interrupted, my voice rising, cracking with the sheer weight of the betrayal. He left me a key to his private safe. Do you know what the last line of his letter was? Do you want to hear it? Evan looked at me, his eyes filled with a misery so deep it almost made me pause. Almost. He said, Do not trust Evan. I screamed the last words, the sound echoing off the glass walls. He warned me about you, his own son. He knew you were a snake, Evan. He knew you were working with her. I shoved him. It wasn't a hard shove, but he stumbled back against a rack of clay pots. They rattled ominously. How could you? I was crying now, hot, angry tears that burned my cheeks. After everything she did to me, after the divorce, you sat there and drank coffee with her while she plotted to destroy us. Evan didn't defend himself. He didn't shout back. He just watched me fall apart. When I finally ran out of breath, standing there heaving and broken, he slowly reached for the canvas messenger bag he had dropped by the door. You are right, he said softly. I met with her. I met with her 11 times over the last 6 months. Get out, I whispered. Get out of my house. I cannot do that, Evan said. He unzipped the bag. Not until you see the rest of it. He pulled out a ruggedized, waterproof USB drive. It was identical to the one I had found in the safe, except for a piece of blue painter's tape on the side with the date written in Sharpie December 12th. He placed it on the bench next to the incriminating photo. Dad didn't just leave you a letter. Caroline, Evan said, his voice steadying. He left me a job. I stared at the drive. What is that? Play it, he said. He pulled his laptop out of the bag, opened it, and booted it up. He didn't look at me. He looked at the screen, his jaw tight. If you want to know why I was smiling at Vanessa, play the video. I hesitated. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to throw him out, to barricade the doors. But the same curiosity that made me drive into a fire won out. I plugged the drive in. A single file appeared. Protocol Bait, MP4. I clicked it. The video player opened. The image was clear. Shot in my father's study. My father, Richard Williams, sat in his leather chair. He looked healthier than he had in the final weeks, which meant this was recorded months before he died. He was wearing his favorite cardigan. He looked directly into the lens, his blue eyes sharp and unclouded. Evan, my father's voice filled the greenhouse. It was a shock to hear it deep, authoritative, devoid of the weakness that had claimed him at the end. If you are watching this with your sister, Richard continued, it means she found the letter. It means she hates you right now. She probably wants to kill you. On screen, my father leaned forward. Caroline, he said, addressing me directly through time. Put down the pitchfork. Your brother isn't a traitor. He is a distraction. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Evan. He was staring at the floor, his arms crossed over his chest. I needed someone on the inside, my father said. I knew Vanessa would try to challenge the estate. I knew she had backing someone with deep pockets and a grudge. I needed to know who it was. But I couldn't send you, Caroline. He paused, and for a moment, his expression softened. You are too much like your mother, he said. You feel things too deeply. If I told you to sit across from Vanessa and pretend to be her friend, you would have thrown a drink in her face within 5 minutes. You have too much integrity for this kind of work. You are a builder, Caroline, not a liar. The words hit me harder than any insult. You are too much like your mother. So I asked Evan, Richard continued. I asked him to approach Vanessa, to play the role of the disgruntled son, to tell her that he felt cheated by the will, that he wanted to cut a deal. I made him the bait. I told him to keep it from you, my father said, his voice hardening again. Because if you knew, you would try to stop him, or worse, your face would give it away. You cannot hide your feelings. Sweetheart, it is your greatest strength as a human being, but it is a fatal liability in a war. And make no mistake, we are at war. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the greenhouse was absolute. I stood there, paralyzed. My anger, which had been a solid, burning thing moments ago, shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces of confusion and hurt. He hadn't trusted me. It wasn't that he thought I was a traitor. It was that he thought I was weak, too much like your mother. He thought I was too emotional, too volatile to handle the truth. He had orchestrated this entire charade pitting his children against each other, letting me believe my brother was a monster because he didn't think I had the stomach for the game. I looked at Evan. The bruises under his eyes suddenly made sense. He hadn't been partying. He had been living a double life, absorbing Vanessa's poison, pretending to betray his family, all while knowing I would eventually despise him for it. He made you do it, I whispered. He didn't make me, Evan said quietly. I volunteered. Once he explained what they were planning, I had to. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, though I knew the answer. Because Dad was right, Evan said. He looked at me, and there was no judgment in his eyes, only a sad resignation. You would have blown my cover. Carrie, you wear your heart on your sleeve. If you knew I was faking it, you would have looked at me differently when we were in public. Vanessa is a shark. She would have sensed it. I gripped the edge of the potting bench. I felt small. I felt foolish. I was the CEO of a $500 million company, yet my father and brother had treated me like a child who needed to be managed. But beneath the humiliation, a colder realization was taking root. I had been wrong about Evan. I had been ready to cut him out of my life based on a picture and a sentence in a letter. "I am sorry," I said. The words tasted like ash. Evan shrugged, a jerky motion. "Don't be. I played the part well. Even I started to hate myself." He walked over to the laptop and closed it. "But it wasn't for nothing. I got something." "What?" I asked, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "Vanessa isn't running the show," Evan said. "You already suspected that, but I confirmed it. She is terrified. Caroline." Half the time we were meeting, she was checking her phone like her life depended on it. "Who is it?" I asked. "Did you get a name?" "No name," Evan said. "But I heard him once. We were at the coffee shop, the one in the picture. She got a call. She tried to step away, but I accidentally spilled my water to get closer. The phone was on high volume." Evan shivered slightly. Despite the warmth of the greenhouse, it was a man, deep voice, very calm. He sounded corporate, like he was ordering a merger, not a crime. "What did he say?" "He said the timeline has moved up. Burn the asset in Tacoma. It will force the board to panic." I froze. "He gave the order?" "Yes," Evan said. "Vanessa didn't want to do it. She was arguing. She wanted the money, not the arson. But he shut her down. He said, 'Do as you are told, or the file on your brother goes to the police.'" My eyes widened. Vanessa's brother had been in and out of rehab for years. "If this man had leverage on him, he is the one pulling the strings," Evan said. "Vanessa and Colton are just the demolition crew. The architect is someone else, someone who knows our company inside and out." I looked back at the table of evidence, the photo of the man in the suit I had found in the safe, the deep voice Evan described. "Harlan," I whispered. "Who?" "I don't know for sure yet," I said, my mind racing, connecting the dots my father had left for me. "But Dad left a file on a man named Harlan Voss. He was the COO 5 years ago. Dad fired him for embezzlement, but it was hushed up." Evan frowned. "I remember him, the guy who always wore those charcoal suits. I thought he moved to Europe." "Maybe he came back," I said. "Or maybe he never left." I looked at Evan. The wall between us was still there, built by my father's secrecy and my own mistrust, but a door had been opened. We were damaged, we were exhausted, and we were both playing roles in a script we hadn't written, but we were on the same side of the stage. "We need to work together," I said. "For real this time. No more secrets. If Dad wants to play games from the grave, fine, but I am not playing by his rules anymore. We tell each other everything." Evan studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Everything." "Good," I said. I picked up the USB drive he had brought. "Because if this man ordered the fire, he committed a felony, and if we can prove it, we don't just win the company back, we send them all to prison." "What do we do first?" Evan asked. I looked out the glass walls of the greenhouse. The sun had fully risen now, burning off the mist. The day had officially begun, the day Vanessa promised I would have nothing. "We go to the office," I said, buttoning my coat. "And we act like the victims they think we are. We let them think the fire worked. We let them think the siblings are fighting." I turned to Evan, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of the steel my father thought I lacked. "And then," I said, "we hunt the wolf." The morning news cycle did not wait for the truth. By the time I walked through the sliding glass doors of the Aurora Flux headquarters in downtown Seattle at 8 in the morning, the narrative was already written, edited, and broadcast to the world. Twitter was ablaze. Aurora Flux Burned was trending in the top 3 spots globally. Grainy footage from news helicopters circled endlessly on the lobby screens, showing the blackened skeleton of the Tacoma facility. The chyron beneath the footage screamed in bold red letters, "Tech Giant Cripples, CEO." Silent. Is this the end of the Williams legacy? The atmosphere inside the building was less like a corporate office and more like a triage unit after a bombing. The hum of productivity was gone, replaced by a frantic, buzzing silence. Employees stood in knots by the coffee machines, whispering behind their hands. Phones were ringing off the hook at the reception desk, a cacophony of shrill demands from investors, journalists, and suppliers. As I crossed the marble floor of the lobby, the noise stopped. It was like a wave crashing against a wall. 300 heads turned. Eyes that usually held respect, or at least professional indifference, were now wide with panic. They were looking at me to see if they still had jobs. They were looking at me to see if their stock options were worth less than the paper they were printed on. I could feel the vibration of my phone in my pocket. Stock alerts. Aurora Flux shares had dipped 12% in pre-market trading. The sharks were not just circling. They were taking bites. I did not stop. I did not look down. I walked straight to the security desk where the lead guard, a burly man named Marcus, who had worked for my father for 20 years, was trying to hold back a reporter who had somehow slipped past the outer perimeter. "Get him out, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the lobby. "Yes, Ms. Williams." I turned to the room. I didn't have a microphone, but the acoustics of the atrium carried my voice. "Everyone," I said, "gather round, now." The hesitation was palpable, but they moved. Within moments, the lobby was a sea of anxious faces, engineers, marketing associates, janitorial staff. They were the people my father had promised to protect. "You have seen the news," I began, keeping my hands clasped in front of me to hide the tremor that still lingered from the night's adrenaline. "You have seen the fire in Tacoma. The media is saying that Aurora Flux has lost its primary manufacturing hub. They are saying we are dead in the water." I paused, making eye contact with the terrified junior analyst in the front row. The media is wrong. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. The building that burned down last night was a facility we divested from 2 years ago. I lied, or rather, I told the technical truth. It was an empty shell. No personnel were inside. No active servers were compromised. No intellectual property was lost. Our operations are fully functional. Our data is secure. I saw the tension break in the room, physical and immediate, like a collective exhale. Shoulders dropped. The junior analyst let out a small sob of relief. "However," I continued, my voice hardening, "this was not an accident. It was an attack intended to scare us. It was an attack intended to break our stock price and our spirit. We will not let that happen. Legal is already handling the misinformation. Your jobs are safe. Now, go back to work and show them that Aurora Flux does not burn." For a second, there was silence. Then, someone started clapping, then another. It wasn't a thunderous ovation, but it was enough. It was the sound of a crew deciding to trust their captain for one more day. I gave a curt nod and headed for the elevators, ignoring the renewed barrage of questions from the press pressed against the glass outside. As the doors closed, sealing me in the quiet steel box, the mask dropped. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal wall. I had bought us time with the staff, but I knew the battle was shifting fronts. I didn't go to the executive suite on the 40th floor. I pressed the button for the basement-level cybersecurity and surveillance. The room was kept at a constant 65 degrees to protect the server racks. It smelled of ozone and stale energy drinks. Damon Shaw, our head of security, was sitting in front of a wall of monitors, his face bathed in the blue light of the screens. He was a man of few words and extreme competence, poached by my father from a government agency 5 years ago. "Damon," I said. He spun his chair around. "Ms. Williams, I heard the speech upstairs on the internal feed. Good work." "It is only good if we can prove who did this," I said, pulling up a chair next to him. "I need you to pull everything we have on the Tacoma site, not just the news footage. I want traffic cams, ATM cameras across the street. Satellite feeds if you can get them, and I want you to scrub the metadata from the video Vanessa sent me. Already on it, Damon said, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. The file your ex-wife sent the metadata was stripped before she sent it, likely by an app, but she made a mistake. She posted a clip to a private Instagram story for her close friends. One of those friends is an associate of ours. Let me see. Damon clicked a file. The video played on the main monitor. It was the same scene I had watched in the rain. Vanessa and Colton laughing in front of the inferno. The arrogance was nauseating. They were preening like vultures over a carcass. Pause it, I commanded. The image froze. Vanessa's mouth was open in a rictus of laughter. Colton was giving a thumbs up. Look at the edges, I said. This wasn't just a joyride. They had a lookout. Damon zoomed in on the far left of the frame, past the distorted light of the flames. It was dark, a wash of black pixels against the night. Enhance the contrast in Sector 1, Damon muttered. The image sharpened, the pixels clarified. Standing near the perimeter fence, well away from the light of the fire, was a figure, a man. He wasn't cheering. He wasn't filming. He was standing perfectly still, his hands in the pockets of a long trench coat. He was watching the fire with the detachment of an engineer watching a controlled demolition. Can we get a face? I asked, leaning in until my nose almost touched the screen. Resolution is too low, Damon said. But look at the stance. Military. No, I whispered. Corporate. The silhouette triggered a memory so sharp it tasted like copper. The straight back, the specific tilt of the head, the way he stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, grounded, immovable. I had seen that stance in this very building. I had seen it in board meetings 5 years ago. Pull up the employee archives, I said, my heart rate spiking. Look for the executive termination files. Fiscal year 2020. Damon frowned but opened a secure folder. Who am I looking for? Harlan Voss. Damon typed the name. A personnel file popped up. The photo was 5 years old, but the eyes were the same cold, calculating, gray like a winter sea. Harlan Voss, the former chief operating officer. I remember him, Damon said slowly. He was fired for philosophical differences. That was the official line. The official line was a lie, I said. My father fired him because he found a siphon. Harlan was moving funds through vendor accounts. It wasn't enough to trigger an audit immediately, but over time, he stole nearly $4 million. Why wasn't he prosecuted? Because he knew where the bodies were buried, I said grimly. Dad cut a deal. Harlan walked away quietly, and we didn't press charges. We thought he went to Europe. I looked back at the screen, at the shadow watching my legacy burn. He didn't go to Europe. I reached into my bag and pulled out the key to the safe, the one I had taken from the greenhouse. I had brought the smaller documents with me. I spread the diary pages on Damon's desk. There, in my father's handwriting, was the entry I had skimmed earlier, but now read with terrifying clarity. October 10th. Harlan called again. He is not done. He thinks the company is his by right of intellect. He threatened to dismantle the machine if I didn't reinstate him. I told him to go to hell. Note to self. Harlan will return, but he won't do it directly. He is a coward who prefers to work through proxies. Proxies, I whispered. Vanessa. It all fit. Vanessa and Colton were loud, greedy, and stupid. They were the perfect distraction, while I was busy fighting a custody battle for the company assets. Harlan was in the background, orchestrating the destruction of the infrastructure. He didn't just want money, he wanted revenge. He wanted to prove that without him, Aurora Flux would crumble. Damon, I said, run a search on shell companies linked to Vanessa Keene, cross-reference them with any known associates of Harlan Voss. It will take a few hours to dig through the offshore layers, Damon said. Do it. I stood up and paced the small room. The pieces of the puzzle were locking together, forming a picture of a trap that had been set years ago. Wait, I said, stopping mid-stride. If Harlan is targeting the physical assets, if he knows the layout of the company better than I do, then he knows about the headquarters. I looked at the ceiling, thinking of the 40 floors of glass and steel above us. He knows this building is the heart. I scrambled for the other document I had found in the safe, the one I hadn't fully understood until this moment. It was a deed of trust. Property 1400 Stewart Street, Aurora Flux HQ, owner of Record Zenith Holdings, Panama. I stared at the paper. My father hadn't just sold the Tacoma facility. He had transferred the ownership of our headquarters, this very building, into a blind trust 3 years ago. Damon, I asked, my voice trembling slightly, who pays the lease on this building? We do, Damon said, to Zenith Holdings. And who owns Zenith Holdings? Damon tapped a few keys. It is a blind trust. The beneficiary is unknown. I looked at the document in my hand. There was a small watermark in the corner, a stylized W. It is us, I realized. My father, he moved the building into a separate entity to protect it from seizure. If Aurora Flux goes bankrupt, if we get sued into oblivion by Vanessa, they can't take the headquarters. We are tenants in our own home. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, hysterical, bordering on manic. Richard Williams had been playing three-dimensional chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. He had anticipated every move Harlan would make. He knew Harlan would try to seize the assets, so he made sure the company didn't technically own any of the big ones. He fireproofed us, I said. He literally fireproofed the company. But my relief was short-lived. I looked back at the screen, at Harlan's silhouette. Harlan Voss was not a man who made mistakes. If he had ordered the burning of the Tacoma facility, he likely knew it was a decoy. Why? I asked the room. Why burn a building you know is worthless? Damon looked up. To provoke a reaction, to see where you run, to see what you try to save. I went cold. I had run to the safe. I had run to the documents. I had brought the evidence here, to the server room. He is flushing us out, I said. He wants to know what we know. I looked at my phone. A new email notification popped up. It was from a generic address, a string of random numbers. Subject: Did you enjoy the heat? I opened it. There was no text, just an attachment. It was a live feed from a security camera. My blood froze. The camera angle was high. Looking down, I saw a woman with blonde hair, wearing a gray coat, standing next to a man in a black tactical shirt. It was me, and Damon. I looked up at the corner of the room. The small red light on the security camera was blinking. Damon, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Cut the feed. What? He is watching us, right now. Damon looked at the email on my phone screen, then at the camera. He slammed his hand down on the master kill switch on his console. The wall of screens went black. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the emergency exit sign. He hacked the internal system, Damon said in the dark. He knows we have identified him. Good, I said, clutching the documents to my chest. Let him know. I turned toward the door. The game of shadows was over. Harlan Voss had stepped into the light, and he had made one critical error. He thought he was scaring a helpless daughter. He didn't realize he was facing the woman who held the only map to the minefield he was walking through. Scrub the room, Damon, I ordered. We are moving the command center, and get my brother on the phone. Where are we going? To the only place my father said was safe, I said, opening the door. We are going to war. Lydia Ramos's office was perched on the 35th floor of a glass needle overlooking Elliott Bay, a stark contrast to the subterranean gloom of the server room we had just vacated. The view usually commanded a premium ferries cutting white wakes through the steel-gray water, the Olympic Mountains standing guard in the distance. But today, the only view that mattered was the chaotic spread of evidence covering her conference table. Evan sat to my right, looking less like a rebellious younger brother and more like a field lieutenant. We had spent the last hour laying out the anatomy of a conspiracy for Lydia, the black solid-state drive, the photos of Vanessa and Evan, the surveillance footage of the arson, the financial records of the shell company. Obsidian Logistics, Lydia. A woman who had defended my father's interests for 2 decades with the precision of a surgeon, picked up the deed to the Tacoma facility. She adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. "So," she said, her voice dry and sharp, "let me make sure I understand the landscape. Your ex-wife and her husband just committed arson on a building they believed belonged to Aurora Flux, but which actually belongs to a holding company your father quietly divested 2 years ago." "Correct," I said, leaning forward. "They think they destroyed our manufacturing capability. In reality, they destroyed an empty warehouse scheduled for demolition, but they do not know that yet." Lydia set the paper down and looked at me. A slow, shark-like smile touched her lips. "Then this is not just property damage. Caroline, this is federal. Since Obsidian Logistics is a separate legal entity registered in Delaware, and the arson affects interstate commerce, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives will have jurisdiction. Vanessa and Colton didn't just break a window. They walked into a federal trap." "We have them on video," Evan added, tapping the laptop where the footage of the burning warehouse was paused. "And we have them admitting to it in the text they sent Caroline." "It is a strong start," Lydia conceded. "But it is not the checkmate you think it is. Not yet." She swiveled her chair, pulling a thick binder from her credenza. "Vanessa's legal team contacted me an hour ago. They are filing an injunction to freeze all Aurora Flux assets pending the reading of what they claim is Richard's true and final testament." "The verbal agreement?" I asked, feeling a spike of irritation. "The one they screamed about in the boardroom?" "No," Lydia said. "They have moved past the verbal claim. They are alleging there is a physical document, a codicil signed 3 weeks before Richard died, granting Vanessa 30% of the voting shares and a significant cash settlement." "That is impossible," I said. "Dad was lucid until the end. He would never have signed that." "They are banking on the chaos," Lydia explained. "They know the arson story is tanking the stock. They know investors are panicked. They are betting that you will settle just to make the bleeding stop. They want a payout. Caroline, they don't actually want to run the company." My phone buzzed on the table. It was Gerald Brock. I stared at the screen. The name flashed like a warning light. "Answer it," Lydia said. "Put it on speaker. Let us hear what the board is thinking." I tapped the green icon. "Gerald, I am in a meeting." "Caroline," Gerald's voice boomed through the speaker, smooth and overly solicitous. "I apologize for the intrusion, but the market is reacting poorly to the silence. The stock is down 15% since the opening bell." "I am handling it. Gerald, we are issuing a statement shortly." "A statement might not be enough," Gerald said. The tone of his voice shifted, becoming conspiratorial. "Listen, I have been fielding calls. There is a lifeline." "Have you heard of Northline Dynamics?" I stiffened. Northline was a predatory equity firm known for stripping companies for parts. "I know them. They are vultures." "They are interested in a stability investment," Gerald said. "A significant injection of capital to calm the market. They are offering to buy 20% of the floating shares at a premium. It would stop the slide. It would save us." "Caroline." "It would be a hostile takeover disguised as a rescue," I shot back. "If they get 20% and they ally with any dissenting board members, I lose control of the company." "Sometimes," Gerald said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Losing control is better than losing everything. You need to be pragmatic. Your father isn't here to play the hero anymore. Think about it. I can set up a meeting for this afternoon." I looked at Evan. His eyes were hard. We both knew what this was. "I will take it under advisement. Gerald," I said coldly, "do not agree to anything." I ended the call. "He is in on it," Evan said immediately. "He has to be. Northline Dynamics. That is exactly the kind of firm Harlan Voss would use to regain entry. They buy the shares, and then they install Harlan as the turnaround CEO. We need proof," Lydia said. "Suspicion is not evidence." "We have the SSD," I said. "We haven't gone through all the files yet. Dad said there was a leak. If Gerald is the leak, it will be in there." I pulled the black drive toward me and plugged it into Lydia's secure terminal. The file structure was chaotic. My father's filing system was a labyrinth of cryptic folder names. I found a folder simply labeled The Rats. Inside was a cache of intercepted emails. My father had been monitoring the outbound traffic from the board's private server. It was illegal, strictly speaking, but Richard Williams had never let legality stand in the way of survival. I scrolled through the list. Most were mundane corporate chatter, but then I saw a pattern. Every time a major strategic decision was made in the last year, the new battery prototype, the land acquisition in Nevada, the decision to sell the logistics division, an email was sent from an anonymous account, Watchered by One, to an external address, VosMeridianProtonMail.com. Vos Meridian, Evan whispered. That is the shell company. I opened one of the emails. It was dated 4 months ago. Subject: Cognitive Decline Update. Body: The old man is fading. He confused the Q3 projections with the Q1 actuals today. The daughter is distracted. The son is absent. Now is the time to prep the medical narrative. Doctor, Eris is pliable. Price is $50,000. I felt sick. Who sent this? Lydia leaned in, her finger tracing the header. The sender used a VPN to mask the IP address. But look at the timestamp, 2:32 in the afternoon. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. That was the day of the board meeting where Dad collapsed. We were all in the room. Not everyone, Evan said. Gerald stepped out to take a call. I remember because I was annoyed by the disruption. We can cross-reference the server logs, I said. If Gerald logged into the secure mail server at that exact time, we can do that later, Lydia interrupted. Focus on the content of that email. Dr. Eris is pliable. Who is Dr. Eris? He was Dad's neurologist, I said. He signed the death certificate. He signed the competency evaluations. I clicked on another file in the folder, an audio file simply labeled Eris Recording, WAVE. My father must have had a recording device in his hospital room. The audio crackled to life. I heard the beep of a heart monitor. Then, a voice I recognized instantly, Vanessa. You know what is at stake, Doctor. Vanessa's voice was smooth, persuasive, but with an edge of steel. If the will is contested, we need to show that Richard was not in his right mind when he wrote the previous version. We need a diagnosis of advanced vascular dementia, dating back at least 6 months. Ms. Keene, a male voice replied. Dr. Eris, sounding nervous. Richard is sharp. His memory is intact. I cannot fabricate a medical history. I could lose my license. You could lose a lot more than your license, Vanessa said. We know about the malpractice suit in Chicago that you paid to make disappear. It would be a shame if the medical board reopened that investigation. There was a long silence on the tape. What do you need me to write? The doctor finally whispered. I slammed my hand on the table. That witch. Lydia's eyes were gleaming. This is it. This is the silver bullet. This proves undue influence, extortion, and fraud. If she tries to present a new will, we play this tape, and she goes to prison for fraud on top of the arson. So we arrest her now? Evan asked. We give this to the police. No, I said. A plan was forming in my mind, cold and precise. If we arrest her now, we only get her, we don't get Harlan, and we don't get Gerald. We need them all in the same room. We need them to think they have won. I turned to Lydia. When is the reading of the will? Your father's instructions were specific, Lydia said. He wanted it read at the Cliffside Estate in Oregon, the Gray Point House. He specified that all potential beneficiaries must be present. That includes Vanessa. And the board? I asked. The executor is required to invite the board chairman as a witness to the transition of the controlling shares. Lydia said, Gerald will have to be there. Perfect, I said. I looked out at the bay. The ferry was docking now, unloading its cargo. We are going to Oregon, I said. Lydia, I want you to set it up. Tell Vanessa's lawyers we are ready to hear their claims. Tell them we are terrified. Tell them I am ready to concede. You want to lure them in, Lydia said. nodding in approval. I want them to walk into that room thinking they are about to carve up my father's carcass, I said. I want Vanessa to wear her best dress. I want Colton to bring his camera crew. I want Gerald to have the Northline contracts in his briefcase. And then, Evan asked, and then we burn them down. I said, not with fire, with the truth. I will contact the Tillamook County Sheriff, Lydia said, making a note on her legal pad. We can have deputies stationed in the guest house, but we need the timing to be perfect. If we spring the trap too early, Gerald might lawyer up and claim he was just a bystander. We wait until the will is presented, I said. We wait until Vanessa puts that forged document on the table. That is the moment the crime is consummated. That is when we strike. I looked down at the binder Lydia had prepared. It was heavy, filled with legal precedents and defensive strategies. I closed it and pushed it aside. We are not using the defensive strategy, I said. We are going on the offensive. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection ghosted against the glass a woman in a dark blazer, hair pulled back, eyes tired but clear. I didn't see the hesitant artist anymore. I saw the CEO my father had always insisted I could be. Evan, I said, not turning around. Get the car ready. We have a long drive to the coast. What about the company? He asked. What about the stock price? Let it drop, I said. Let them sell. Because when the sun comes up on Monday morning and the world finds out that Aurora Flux just purged its corruption and secured its future, those shares are going to skyrocket, and I'm going to be the one buying them back. I turned back to them. This is the end of the game, I said, and we are going to make sure they remember it. The three of us stood there for a moment in the quiet office, the weight of the coming confrontation hanging in the air. We were outnumbered. We were outgunned by a hidden enemy with deep pockets, but we had something they didn't have. We had the truth, and we had my father's final, brilliant, ruthless plan. Let's go, I said. The wolves are waiting. The drive down the Oregon coast was a journey into the throat of a storm. By the time we crossed the border from Washington, the sky had bruised into a deep, violent purple, and the Pacific Ocean was throwing itself against the cliffs with a rage that shook the ground. Gray Point, the estate my father had built as a retreat from the world, stood on a jagged promontory of black basalt, jutting out over the churning water like the prow of a stone ship. It was a brutal, beautiful place. All sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling glass, designed to let the elements in while keeping the cold out. I had not been here since I was a teenager. Back then, it had felt like a prison of isolation. Today, it felt like a courtroom built by nature itself. I parked the car on the gravel drive, Evan, Lydia, and I stepped out into the gale. The wind whipped my hair across my face, tasting of salt and impending rain. We moved quickly toward the heavy timber doors, the sound of the surf below booming like distant cannon fire. Inside, the house was a cavern of silence. The main hall was vast, dominated by a fireplace large enough to stand in. Though it was currently cold and dark, the furniture was draped in white sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light filtering through the rain-streaked windows. It is freezing in here, Evan muttered, rubbing his arms. It is designed to be, I said, my voice echoing in the emptiness. Dad always said clarity comes from the cold. Lydia set her briefcase on the long oak table in the center of the room. She looked out at the ocean, her expression unreadable. This is the stage he chose. Caroline. He knew exactly what the atmosphere would be. He was directing this scene from 2 years ago. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. I felt a tightening in my chest, a mixture of grief and fear. My father had set a trap, yes, but he had also placed me in the center of it. I was the bait, the executioner, and the daughter, all at once. They are here, Evan said, looking out the window. A convoy of black SUVs crunched up the driveway. They didn't park discreetly. They swarmed. Doors flew open, and suddenly, the solitude of Gray Point was shattered. A camera crew spilled out, first men in cargo shorts and rain ponchos, hefting heavy cameras on their shoulders. boom mics covered in windjammers held high like weapons. This was not a legal proceeding, it was a production. Vanessa stepped out of the lead vehicle. I had to suppress a gasp of disbelief. She was wearing a floor-length, silver-sequined gown with a slit up the thigh, a fur stole wrapped around her shoulders, and diamond earrings that caught the dull light. She looked like she was walking the red carpet at a gala, not attending the reading of a dead man's will on a stormy cliff. Colton followed her, wearing a tuxedo with the bow tie undone, affecting a look of casual, wealthy exhaustion. He took her hand, and they paused for a moment, waiting for the cameras to get the shot of them walking toward the tragic house. "Showtime," Lydia whispered, her eyes hard. The doors opened, and the circus entered. The camera crew immediately began setting up lights, blinding us with sudden, stark illumination. A producer with a headset was barking orders about capturing the emotional texture of the room. "Turn those off," I said, stepping forward. "This is a private legal matter." "Actually," Vanessa said, sweeping into the room with a cloud of heavy perfume, "it is a matter of public interest. The world deserves to know how the Williams family treats the people who built them." She stopped at the other end of the table, striking a pose. The cameras swiveled to frame her against the backdrop of the storm raging outside the window. It was perfect visual storytelling, the grieving, glamorous widow against the cold, unfeeling corporate daughter. "We are here for justice," Colton announced, his voice booming for the benefit of the boom mic hovering over his head. "We are here to rectify the wrongs done to my wife by a senile old man and his manipulative children." Lydia remained seated, the picture of calm. "Please sit down, Ms. Keene, Mr. Reed, Gerald." I hadn't noticed Gerald Brock entering at the back of the pack, looking uncomfortable in his raincoat, clutching a leather briefcase. He avoided my eyes, taking a seat in the shadows, as far away from the cameras as he could manage. Vanessa sat down, arranging her dress. "Let's get this over with. I have a press conference scheduled for 5 o'clock. "As you wish," Lydia said. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Richard Williams." "The real will," Vanessa corrected. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. She slid it across the table toward Lydia with a theatrical flourish. "This," Vanessa declared, looking directly into the lens of the nearest camera, "is a certified copy of the codicil Richard signed 3 weeks before his death. In it, he acknowledges my vital role in the founding of Aurora Flux. He grants me 30% of the voting stock, a cash settlement of $50 million, and the rights to the Williams family name." The camera zoomed in on the envelope. "He promised me this," Vanessa said, her voice catching with a practiced sob. "He told me, Vanessa, they will try to take it from you, but I will make sure you are safe." Colton placed a hand on her shoulder, looking grimly at me. "Caroline, you knew about this. You hid the original. You took advantage of your father's dementia to lock him away, to poison him against the woman he loved. It is elder abuse, plain and simple." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The red tally lights on the cameras burned like eyes. Lydia picked up the envelope. She opened it slowly. She took out the document and adjusted her glasses. I watched her face. I saw the microscopic twitch of her eyebrow. She saw it. The margins were wrong. The font was a default setting, not the custom typeface my father's firm used. The notary stamp was from a county Richard hadn't visited in 5 years. It was a clumsy, desperate forgery, but Lydia didn't say a word. She didn't object. She just placed the document on the table. "Thank you for presenting this," Lydia said. "It will be entered into the record." Vanessa smiled a triumphant, predatory baring of teeth. She thought she had won. She thought Lydia's silence was submission. "However," Lydia continued, her voice rising slightly to cut over the sound of the wind, "before we proceed with the distribution of assets, there is a matter of the estate's current valuation. As you know, there was a significant event last night involving company property. A tragedy," Colton said quickly, nodding at the camera. "We were devastated to hear about the fire. but it just proves that the current leadership is incompetent. Is that so? Lydia asked. Caroline, would you mind? I picked up the remote control for the large flat-screen monitor mounted above the fireplace. We received some documentation regarding the fire, I said. We thought the beneficiaries should see it. I pressed the button. The screen flared to life. It was not a spreadsheet. It was not a police report. It was the video. The room was suddenly filled with the roar of flames and the crackle of burning timber. The orange light from the screen washed over the pale faces of the people in the room, making them look like demons. On screen, Vanessa's face appeared, distorted and manic. Say goodbye. Caroline, she screamed. In the room. The real Vanessa gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. On screen, Colton waved the gas can. We took it all. It is gone. Caroline, it is all gone. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the audio from the video echoing off the stone walls. The camera crew lowered their equipment, looking from the screen to Vanessa and back. Unsure if they were filming a triumph or a funeral, Vanessa froze. She looked at Colton. Colton looked like he was about to vomit. Turn it off, Colton shouted, standing up and knocking his chair over. That is a deepfake AI generated. You are trying to frame us. Lydia didn't blink. She let the video play until the end, where they laughed in front of the collapsing roof. Then she paused it on the frame where they were high-fiving. This video, Lydia said, her voice ice-cold, was sent from Vanessa's phone to Caroline's phone at 3:18 this morning. The metadata confirms the location and the device. We also have traffic camera footage confirming your vehicle entering and exiting the industrial park. It was a protest, Vanessa stammered, standing up, her sequins rattling. We were just making a statement. It was a symbolic act against corporate greed. It was arson, I said. And you filmed it. So what? Vanessa sneered, dropping the grieving widow act entirely. The company is ours anyway. We burned our own property. You cannot charge me for destroying something I own 30% of. Lydia smiled. It was a terrifying expression. That is the interesting part. Vanessa, Lydia said, you don't own it, and neither does Aurora Flux. Lydia picked up the deed transfer document I had given her. The building you burned down the facility at Tacoma Sector 4 was sold by Richard Williams 2 years ago. It is owned by Obsidian Logistics, a holding company with no affiliation to the Williams estate. It was an empty warehouse scheduled for demolition next month. The color drained from Vanessa's face so completely she looked like a corpse. What? She whispered. You didn't burn down a $500 million company, I said, standing up. You burned down a derelict shack owned by a third party. That makes it federal arson of commercial property. It is a felony carrying a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 to 20 years. Colton made a sound like a strangled cat. No, that is a lie, Harlan said. He stopped. He slapped a hand over his mouth. Harlan? I asked. Who is Harlan? But before he could answer, the heavy front doors groaned open. They didn't need to knock. Lydia had arranged it. 4 uniformed officers from the Tillamook County Sheriff's Office stepped into the room, shaking the rain from their jackets. They looked at the scene, the cameras, the sequined dress, the frozen faces. Vanessa Keene, Colton Reed, the lead deputy asked. You cannot touch me, Vanessa shrieked, backing away until she hit the stone fireplace. I am the heir, I have the will. We have a warrant for your arrest, the deputy said, walking forward with handcuffs unhooked. Charges are arson in the first degree, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Wait, Lydia commanded. One more thing before you take them. She looked at me. I nodded. The claim of the will, Lydia said. Vanessa claims Richard was incompetent, that he was manipulated. I think Richard should speak for himself. I pressed the remote again. The image of the fire vanished, replaced by the interior of my father's study. My father appeared on the screen. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp, blazing with the intelligence that had built an empire. He was holding a newspaper dated 2 weeks before his death. My name is Richard Williams, the video Richard said. I am recording this statement to certify that I am of sound mind and body. I am fully aware of the extent of my assets and the disposition of my estate. Vanessa stopped fighting the air. She stared at the screen, mesmerized by the ghost of the man she had tormented. I know there are wolves at the door, Richard continued. I know there will be attempts to forge my signature, to claim I was senile, to twist my words. Let this recording serve as my testimony. I leave 100% of my voting shares and the entirety of Aurora Flux Systems to my daughter, Caroline Williams. He leaned into the camera. To anyone else claiming a piece of this company, you are a thief and a liar. And if you are watching this, it means you have already walked into the trap I set for you. The video cut to black. The room was silent except for the wind howling outside. The reality crew had started filming again, capturing the raw, unfiltered destruction of Vanessa's life. The deputy stepped forward and snapped the cuffs onto Vanessa's wrists. The metallic click echoed like a gunshot. Another deputy grabbed Colton, who was sobbing openly now. "No!" Vanessa screamed as they began to drag her toward the door. She thrashed, her dress tearing on the edge of the table. "I didn't do it. It wasn't my idea." She looked wildly around the room, her eyes locking on Gerald Brock, who was shrinking into his corner, trying to become invisible. "It was Harlan!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice shredding her throat. "Harlan Voss. He made us do it. He gave us the schedule. He told us the building was the heart of the company. We were just pawns." The cameramen swung their lenses toward her. The name hung in the air, recorded in high definition. "Harlan Voss," she screamed again as she was hauled out into the storm. "He is the one you want. He is the one who wants the company dead." The doors slammed shut, cutting off her screams. Colton was led out behind her, his head hanging low. The room felt suddenly vast. The silence that followed was ringing in my ears. I looked at the camera crew, who were looking at me, waiting for a reaction. "Get out," I said. They didn't argue. They packed up their gear in record time and fled. Sensing that the entertainment was over and the real danger was just beginning, when the last of them was gone, only Evan, Lydia, Gerald, and I remained. I turned slowly to Gerald. He was pale, sweating despite the chill in the room. He was clutching his briefcase so hard his knuckles were white. "Well, Gerald," I said, walking toward him. "You heard the lady? Harlan Voss?" Gerald swallowed hard. "A desperate woman. Saying anything to save herself. Harlan has been gone for years." "Has he?" I asked. "Then why did you look so terrified when she said his name?" I stopped in front of him. "The show is over. Gerald, Vanessa and Colton are gone. But the trap isn't closed yet, because we both know Harlan didn't work alone. He needed eyes inside the boardroom." I looked down at his briefcase. "Show me the Northline Dynamics contract," I said, "and then tell me exactly where Harlan is hiding." Gerald looked at the door, then back at me. He realized there was no exit. The storm was outside, but the hurricane was standing right in front of him. The call from the lead detective came while we were crossing the Ship Canal Bridge, the tires of the SUV humming against the wet grating. Harlan Voss was gone. He had boarded a private charter flight out of Boeing Field 3 hours before the police units arrived at his penthouse in Bellevue. The flight plan listed a destination in Mexico, but the transponder had been turned off somewhere over international waters. An interstate manhunt had been upgraded to a federal fugitive pursuit, but we all knew the truth. Harlan was not running. He was repositioning. We didn't go home. We went straight to the nerve center of Aurora Flux. It was 2 a.m. when Evan and I swiped our badges to enter the server farm deep in the basement of the headquarters. The room was a stark contrast to the storm-battered chaos of the Oregon coast. Here, the air was scrubbed clean and chilled to a constant 60 degrees. Rows of black monoliths hummed with the collective data of the company, their blue status lights blinking in the semi-darkness like the eyes of 1,000 sleeping insects. Priya, our chief engineer, was already there. She looked small against the towering racks, wrapped in a thick wool cardigan, her face illuminated by the harsh glow of 3 different monitors. She didn't offer a greeting. She just spun her chair around, her expression grave. "I found it," Priya said. Her voice was tight. "And Caroline, it is bad. It is worse than a fire." I pulled up a chair next to her, the metal cold against my legs. Evan stood behind us, his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the lines of code scrolling down the center screen. "Show me," I said. Priya typed a command, and the screen shifted to a schematic of our proprietary energy distribution unit, the core product that powered grid stabilizers in 20 states. "I started digging when you sent word about the Tacoma arson," Priya explained, her fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. "I figured if they were attacking physical assets, they might try a digital assault too. I ran a deep integrity check on the firmware updates scheduled for next month." She pointed to a block of highlighted text buried deep within the kernel. It looked like gibberish to the untrained eye, but to an engineer, it was a death sentence. "This is a logic bomb," Priya said. "It was inserted 4 months ago, right around the time your father went into the hospital. It is dormant right now, but the trigger is set for a specific date." "When?" Evan asked. 2 days from now," Priya replied. "The 15th, the day we push the quarterly over-the-air update to all client systems." I stared at the screen, the implications crashing over me like icy water. "What does it do?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. "It doesn't steal data," Priya said, shaking her head. "It is purely destructive. Once this code executes, it overwrites the voltage regulation parameters. It will cause the units to misread the load. They will overheat. They will fail. Best case scenario, we brick 50,000 units and face a recall that bankrupts the company. Worst case scenario, we cause electrical fires in server farms and hospitals across the country." The room went silent. Save for the relentless whir of the cooling fans, this was Harlan's endgame. The arson in Tacoma was just a visual spectacle, a distraction to keep us looking at the physical world while he prepared to destroy our reputation forever. If that update went out, Aurora Flux would not just lose money, we would be liable for criminal negligence. We would be finished. "Can we patch it?" Evan asked. "I am isolating it now," Priya said. "But look at the access logs. Whoever put this in had root access. They didn't hack in from the outside. They used a legitimate credential." She pulled up the log file. User admin remote 04. Source IP 192.168. "Trace the IP," I ordered. "I did," Priya said. "It routes through a VPN, but the exit node is static. It traces back to a registered server in the Cayman Islands." She hit another key, bringing up the ownership registry for the server, Voss Meridian Holdings. "He left his fingerprint," I whispered. "He wanted us to know." "He didn't think we would look," Evan corrected. "He thought we would be too busy fighting Vanessa over the will and putting out the fire in Tacoma. He thought he was invisible." My phone buzzed. It was Lydia. "Caroline," her voice was tinny in the sterile room. "I am at the King County Correctional Facility. Vanessa is asking for you. She says she will not talk to the federal agents until she speaks to you." "I have nothing to say to her," I said, the anger flaring up again. "She says she has the ledger," Lydia said. "She says she knows where Harlan keeps the names." I looked at the code on the screen, the digital poison meant to kill my father's legacy. Then I looked at Evan. "Stay here with Priya," I told him. "Do not let that update go out. Pull the plug on the whole network if you have to." "Where are you going?" Evan asked. "To see my wife," I said. The interrogation room at the jail was a box of gray cinder blocks and fluorescent lights that buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. I sat on one side of the metal table, my hands clasped in front of me. Lydia stood in the corner, a silent sentinel. The heavy steel door opened, and a guard led Vanessa in. The transformation was shocking. The glamorous woman in the silver sequined dress, who had stormed the Cliffside estate only hours ago, was gone. In her place was a figure in a shapeless orange jumpsuit, her hair matted and pulled back in a severe bun. Her face scrubbed clean of makeup to reveal pale, blotchy skin. She looked 10 years older. She looked broken. The guard chained her wrists to the bolt in the table and stepped back. Vanessa didn't look up. She stared at her hands, her fingers picking nervously at a loose thread on her sleeve. "You wanted to see me," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion she probably expected. Vanessa flinched. She looked up, and her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "I didn't know about the code," she whispered. "I swear, Caroline, I didn't know he was going to hurt people. He just said we were going to break the stock price so he could buy it back cheap." "You burned a building down." "Vanessa," I said, "you don't get to claim the moral high ground." "I had no choice," she hissed, a flash of the old fire returning before being extinguished by fear. "You think I wanted to do this? You think I wanted to hurt Richard?" "You seemed to enjoy it when you were demanding half my company," I reminded her. "Because that was the deal," she cried, leaning forward as far as the chains would allow. Harlan promised me that if I played the part, if I got the money, he would give me the files back. He would let me go." I narrowed my eyes. "What files?" Vanessa slumped back, the fight draining out of her. 10 years ago, when I was just a junior assistant in the marketing department, I made a mistake, a big one. I was young, and I was stupid, and I got involved in some recreational habits. There was a party, people were filming. She swallowed hard, shame coloring her cheeks. Harlan found the videos. He was the COO then. He called me into his office. I thought I was getting fired. Instead, he showed me the clips. He told me that if I didn't want them sent to my parents, to the press, to everyone I knew, I belonged to him. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I had hated Vanessa for her greed, for her betrayal. I had never considered that she was a victim of the same monster I was hunting. "He made you get close to my father," I realized. "He scripted everything," Vanessa said, tears leaking from her eyes. "He told me when to smile, when to listen, when to suggest things to Richard. He told me to marry you." The words hung in the air between us. He told me to marry you. I felt like I had been punched. The memories of our marriage, the laughter, the trips to the coast, the quiet moments in bed suddenly twisted into something grotesque. It wasn't just a failed relationship, it was a covert operation. I had been sleeping next to a spy who was being blackmailed by my father's executive. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. I couldn't help it. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Vanessa looked at me, and for the first time, her expression was unguarded. "I wanted to. You were kind. Caroline, you were the only safe thing in my world. But I was terrified every single day. Every time my phone rang, I thought it was him." "Who is the mole?" I asked, pushing the pain aside. I needed to be the CEO now, not the ex-wife. "Evan said you met a man, someone on the board." "I never got his name," Vanessa said. "Harlan kept us separated, but I saw him once, at a drop-off in a parking garage. Older man, expensive suits. He has a distinct way of talking. He is obsessed with the phrase, market stability. He uses it in every sentence." "Gerald?" I whispered. It was the confirmation I needed. Gerald Brock, the man who had just tried to sell me out to Northline Dynamics. "He is the one who fed Harlan the meeting schedules," Vanessa said. "He is the one who told Harlan when the security updates were happening so he could slip the code in." "Where is Harlan now?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "He has safe houses everywhere, but he keeps records. He is paranoid. He writes everything down because he doesn't trust the cloud." She looked at Lydia, then back at me. "I can give you the leverage," Vanessa said. "But I want a deal. I want federal protection. I am not afraid of prison. Caroline, I am afraid of him finding me." I looked at Lydia. She gave a microscopic nod. "We could work with that." "Where is it?" I asked. "Portland," Vanessa said. "There is a private vault in the basement of a bank in the Pearl District. It is under a fake name, Obsidian One. I have the key." "You have the key." "He gave it to me to hold," she said bitterly. "In case anything happened to him, he wanted me to release the information. It was his insurance policy against his own partners. He didn't think I would use it against him. She reached into the collar of her jumpsuit and pulled out a thin chain. Suspended from it was a heavy, intricate iron key. "It is all in there," she said, her voice trembling. "The payments to the doctors to fake the dementia diagnosis, the transfers to Gerald's offshore accounts, and the blueprints for the logic bomb." The guard stepped forward to unlock the chain from her neck. He handed the key to me. It felt warm from her skin. I stood up. I looked down at the woman who had been my wife, my enemy, and was now just a frightened wreckage of a human being. "Thank you," I said. Vanessa looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. "Caroline, do you believe me?" I looked at the key in my hand, then at the steel door. "I believe you were used," I said quietly. "But you still lit the match. Vanessa, you still held the gas can." I turned and walked out of the room. I heard her start to sob behind me, a lonely, echoing sound that faded as the heavy door clanged shut. Lydia walked beside me down the long, fluorescent hallway. "We have enough for a warrant for the vault," Lydia said. "We can be in Portland by dawn." "Do it," I said. I walked out of the jail into the cool Seattle night. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. I took a deep breath, trying to purge the smell of the prison from my lungs. My heart felt heavy, bruised by the revelation that my marriage had been a lie, orchestrated by a sociopath. But my mind was clear. I had the key, I had the location, and I knew exactly who the traitor in the boardroom was. I wasn't just a daughter protecting a legacy anymore. I was a woman who had been wronged in the most intimate way possible. Harlan Voss hadn't just attacked my company. He had weaponized my life. I gripped the iron key in my pocket until the edges dug into my palm. "Let's go get the book," I said to the empty street. "It is time to close the ledger." The conference room on the 42nd floor was small, windowless, and smelled intensely of stale espresso and ozone. It was a tactical bunker, a far cry from the mahogany-lined boardroom where I had been humiliated just 48 hours prior. "We have two objectives," I said, leaning over the architectural blueprints of our network infrastructure spread across the table. "First, we neutralize the logic bomb Harlan planted. We cannot let that code execute and destroy our products. Second, we need to catch him, not just chase him away, but catch him in the act of a federal crime that puts him away for life." Around the table sat my war counsel, Evan, looking ragged but focused, Lydia, her legal pad already filled with notes, Priya, tapping furiously on a tablet, and Damon Shaw, our head of security, who was currently wiring a laptop to an encrypted satellite uplink. "The code is isolated," Priya said, not looking up. "But it is tricky. It has a dead man's switch. If I try to delete it, it might trigger a failsafe that wipes the servers. We cannot just scrub it. We have to let it think it is running." "A sandbox," Evan said. "We build a cage." "Exactly," Priya nodded. "I am building a mirror environment, a digital clone of the Aurora Flux grid control system. To Harlan, it will look like the live network. He will see the voltage regulators, the client feedback loops, everything, but it will be a simulation. If he detonates the bomb, he blows up a ghost town." "That handles the defense," I said. "Now for the offense." "Lydia, the warrant." "Judge Caldwell signed it 20 minutes ago," Lydia said, holding up her phone. "Based on Vanessa's testimony and the key she provided, we have authorization to open the safe deposit box in Portland. Evan and I will go," I said. "Damon, you stay here. I need you to focus on the mole." "Gerald Brock," Damon said, his voice low and dangerous. "I am already inside his laptop. He is careless. He uses the same password for his corporate email as he does for his golf club membership." "Track him," I ordered. "Don't block him. Don't alert him. Let him talk to Harlan. We need to trace the signal back to the source." I grabbed my coat. "Let's move." The drive to Portland was a blur of gray highway and adrenaline. We didn't talk much. The silence in the car was the heavy, loaded silence of soldiers moving toward the front line. We arrived at the bank in the Pearl District just as they were opening. It was a boutique financial institution, the kind that prided itself on discretion and anonymity, perfect for a man like Harlan Voss. The vault manager, a man with a severe haircut and shaking hands, led us downstairs after reviewing the federal warrant. The air in the vault was cool and smelled of old paper and dust. I found box number 402. I inserted the heavy iron key Vanessa had surrendered. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I slid the long metal drawer out. It wasn't full of cash. Harlan was too smart for that. Cash was bulky. Information was lightweight and infinitely more valuable. Inside lay a single, leather-bound ledger. I opened it. The handwriting was precise, architectural, and instantly recognizable. It was Harlan's. "He wrote it down," Evan whispered, looking over my shoulder. "Why would he write it down?" "Arrogance," I said, turning the pages. "And insurance. If he ever got caught, he wanted to take everyone down with him." The ledger was a catalog of corruption. January 12th, 50,000 to Dr. Aris, memo cognitive decline narrative. March 4th, 100,000 to Gerald Brock, account Cayman Shell. 4. Memo security schedule access. April 10th, 20,000 to Portland City Inspector. Memo ignore zoning permits for Obsidian Warehouse. It was all there. Every bribe, every payoff, every twisted step of the plan to dismantle my father's legacy. "This is it," Lydia said, her voice echoing in the vault. "This is the RICO case. We have the conspiracy in black and white." "We have the history," I corrected, closing the book. "Now we need the present. We need to catch him pulling the trigger." Back in Seattle, the atmosphere in the secure conference room had shifted from tense to electric. Damon was staring at a wall of monitors. "Got him," he said the moment I walked in. "Gerald." "He just sent a message," Damon said. "Encrypted channel. He is panicking." He told his contact user handle Meridian Prime that Vanessa has been arrested and the board is asking questions. And the reply, Damon pointed to the screen. A single line of text glowed in green. "Initiate the burn protocol. We execute the logic bomb during the live stream. Maximum visibility." "He wants to do it live," Evan said, pacing the room. "He wants to brick the devices while you are on air. He wants the stock to crash in real time." "Where's the signal coming from?" I asked. Damon typed a command. A map of the Pacific Northwest appeared. A red dot pulsed just south of Portland, near a small industrial airfield in Aurora. "It is a private hangar," Damon said. "Registered to a shell company owned by Voss Meridian. He is there, and he has a jet on the tarmac. Flight plan filed for Rio de Janeiro, departing in 2 hours." "Rio has no extradition treaty for corporate espionage," Lydia noted. "If he gets wheels up, he is gone." I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the afternoon. "Get the FBI on the line," I said. "We are going to give Harlan exactly what he wants." Agent Miller of the FBI Cyber Crimes Division was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, and he listened to our plan with skeptical intensity. We were on a secure video link. "You want to bait a suspect into committing a cyber attack on critical infrastructure?" Miller asked. "Ms. Williams, that is risky. If your sandbox fails, if that code leaks to the real grid—" "It won't fail," Priya interrupted, stepping into the frame. "I wrote the containment protocols myself. The environment is air-gapped from the actual product line. Harlan will be firing bullets into a ballistic gel block, not a crowd." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "We have teams moving on the airfield in Aurora now, but we need probable cause to breach the hangar. We need him to touch the keyboard. We need him to initiate the attack." "He will," I said. "I am going to make him." I turned to my communication director, a young woman named Sarah, who looked terrified but ready. "Send the alert," I ordered. "Internal and external, press release, social media, everything." Sarah hit send. Within seconds, the notification hit the wires. Urgent Aurora Flux CEO Caroline Williams to hold emergency global live stream at 6:00 p.m. Pacific. Topic: The truth about the attacks. The hook is in the water, Evan said. Now we wait, I said. 5:30 in the afternoon, 30 minutes to air. I stood in the server room, watching the monitors. The red dot on the map near the airfield hadn't moved. Harlan was waiting. He was watching. Traffic is spiking, Priya said. Someone is probing the external firewall of the grid control system. Is it him? It is the same IP address, Priya confirmed. He is testing the door handles. He sees the sandbox. He thinks it is the production server. He is logging in with the admin credentials he stole from Gerald. On the screen, a line of code appeared in the log. User admin remote 04 logged in. Access level root. Command upload. Payload destruct sequence V2. He is loading the gun, Damon said. Hold, I whispered. Don't block him. Let him upload it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was insanity. I was inviting a digital bomb into my house, trusting that the glass walls Priya had built would hold. Payload uploaded, Priya announced, her voice trembling slightly. Status armed, waiting for execution command. He is waiting for the live stream, I said. He wants to push the button when the whole world is watching me. My phone rang. It was Agent Miller. We are in position at the hangar, Miller whispered. We have visual on the suspect. He is sitting at a desk in the office overlooking the hangar floor. Laptop open. Plane engines are spooling up. Hold your position, Agent, I said. Wait for my signal. Copy that. I turned to Evan. It is time. I left the server room and walked down the hall to the main auditorium. It was empty of people but full of technology. Cameras were set up in a semicircle. The lighting was stark, dramatic. A massive screen behind the podium displayed the Aurora Flux logo. I checked my appearance in a monitor. I wore a black suit, sharp and severe, no jewelry, no makeup to hide the fatigue. I looked like a warrior who had survived a siege. I walked up the steps to the podium. 10 minutes to air, the stage manager called out. I stood there in the quiet, the hum of the equipment the only sound. I closed my eyes for a second. I thought about my father. I thought about the greenhouse, the smell of damp earth, the letter he had hidden for me. Do not trust anyone. He had been right, and he had been wrong. I couldn't trust the people he had surrounded himself with, the Geralds and the Harlans, but I could trust the people who mattered. Evan, Priya, Lydia, Damon. I had built my own team. I was playing on my own board now. I looked at the camera lens, the dark glass eye that would soon beam my face to millions of screens around the world, to investors in New York, to competitors in Silicon Valley, to Gerald Brock, sweating in his office upstairs, and to Harlan Voss, sitting in a hangar in Oregon, his finger hovering over the enter key. He thought he was the hunter. He thought I was the prey. The emotional daughter flailing in the spotlight. I opened my eyes. A cold calm settled over me. Are we ready? I asked the room. 5 minutes. Ms. Williams. I looked at the teleprompter, then looked away. I didn't need a script. I had the truth. Let's do this, I said. Let's show them what happens when they come for the Williams family. I tapped the earpiece in my ear. Priya status. He is online. Priya's voice came through, clear and steady. He is watching the stream feed. His cursor is hovering over the execute button. The second you start talking, he's going to try to burn us down. Good, I said. Make sure the FBI feed is synced to the main screen behind me. It is ready. 3, 2, 1. The stage manager counted down. You are live. The red light on the camera turned on. I looked straight into the lens. My name is Caroline Williams, I said. And for the last 48 hours, my company has been under attack. You have seen the fires. You have heard the rumors. But tonight, I am not here to announce a surrender. I paused. I am here to announce an execution. I didn't smile. I just waited for Harlan to make his move. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The auditorium of the Aurora Flux headquarters was a cavern of noise and light. Every seat was filled. The aisles were choked with standing reporters, investors, and employees. The air was thick with the scent of nervous sweat and the ozone tang of overheated camera equipment. I stood backstage in the wings, listening to the dull roar of the crowd. My heart was not fluttering. It was pounding with the slow, heavy rhythm of a war drum. 30 seconds, the stage manager whispered into my earpiece. You are live in 3, 2. I stepped out. The lights blinded me instantly. A wall of flashbulbs went off, a strobe light effect that turned the sea of faces into a disjointed mosaic. I walked to the podium, gripping the edges with hands that were steady, cold, and ready. I didn't smile. This was not a celebration. It was a tribunal. Good evening, I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, silencing the room instantly. My name is Caroline Williams, and for the last week, you have been told a story about the death of this company. You have been told that we are burning. You have been told that our leadership is incompetent. You have been told that the Williams legacy is over. I paused, looking directly into the primary camera lens, imagining Harlan Voss sitting in his hangar in Oregon, watching this feed on his laptop. Tonight, I said, I am going to tell you the truth. I pressed the button on the clicker concealed in my hand. The massive screen behind me turned black, then flared to life. The attacks on Aurora Flux were not random, I continued, my voice gaining strength. They were not accidents. They were a coordinated assault designed to strip this company of its assets and drive its stock price to zero. The screen shifted. The video of Vanessa and Colton standing in front of the burning Tacoma warehouse played on a loop. The audience gasped. They had seen snippets on the news, but seeing it here, presented by the CEO, felt different. My ex-wife and her husband believed they were destroying our manufacturing hub. I said, they were wrong. They were manipulated into committing a federal crime to create a smokescreen. The image changed. A deed of sale appeared, magnified so every row of text was visible. The building they burned was sold 2 years ago, I explained. It was an empty shell. Aurora Flux lost nothing in that fire except a piece of history that we had already left behind. A murmur rippled through the front row. The investors were leaning forward. They were starting to understand that the narrative of catastrophe was a lie. But the fire was just the distraction, I said, my eyes scanning the room until they landed on the third row, on Gerald Brock. He was sitting stiffly, his face pale, a sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead. He was staring at me with the eyes of a trapped animal. The real attack, I said, was from within. I hit the button again. The screen displayed the bank transfer records we had retrieved from the Portland vault. The numbers were massive. The dates were damning. Payee Gerald Brock. Amount $100,000. Sender Voss Meridian Holdings. The room erupted. Heads turned toward Gerald. The board members sitting on either side of him physically recoiled, sliding their chairs away as if he were radioactive. These are records of payments made to a member of our board of directors, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Payments made in exchange for security schedules, meeting minutes, and access codes. Gerald stood up. This is preposterous, he shouted, his voice cracking. These are fabrications. I will sue you for slander. Sit down, Gerald, I said. I am not done. I played the audio file. The doctor's voice filled the auditorium, trembling and weak. Ms. Keene. I cannot fabricate a medical history followed by Vanessa's sharp, threatening retort. We faced extortion, I said. We faced forgery. We faced a conspiracy to declare my father mentally incompetent so his will could be rewritten. I took a breath. The room was silent now, terrified by the scope of the betrayal. But my father, I said, looking up at the ceiling for a brief second, was always 3 steps ahead. I signaled the control booth. The video of Richard Williams appeared. It was the footage Evan had shown me in the greenhouse, but extended. My father looked into the camera, his expression weary but his eyes burning with a fierce intelligence. If you are seeing this, my father's voice echoed, then Harlan Voss has made his move. He is a man who believes he is the smartest person in the room. He believes he can steal what he could not build. My father leaned forward in the video. Caroline, he said, addressing me across the divide of death. I know you are scared. I know you feel alone. But you are not playing his game. You are playing mine. And on my board, the king does not win. The queen does. The screen went black for a heartbeat. Harlan Voss, I said, speaking the name that had haunted the company for 5 years. The former COO, the architect of this entire scheme. He believes he is safe. He believes he is anonymous. He believes that right now, at this very second, he is about to deliver the final blow. I pointed to the screen. Let's see if he is right. The screen split down the middle. On the left was the live feed of me standing at the podium. On the right, a grainy night vision feed flickered to life. The audience screamed. It was the interior of the hangar in Oregon. We were looking over the shoulder of a man sitting at a desk. He was wearing a dark suit. His laptop was open. On his screen, the live stream of my face was playing. It was a hall of mirrors. The audience was watching a man watching me watch them. That is Harlan Voss, I said. Live from Aurora, Oregon. On the screen, Harlan froze. He saw himself. He saw the camera angle from the hidden FBI surveillance unit in the rafters. He whipped his head around, looking for the lens, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Right now, I narrated, my voice cold. Harlan is attempting to execute a command, a logic bomb designed to destroy our product grid. Priya, standing in the wings, hit a key on her tablet. The screen overlaid the code execution log. We saw the command line, command execute destruct. Harlan slammed his finger onto the enter key on his laptop. He was trying to burn it all down before they caught him. On the big screen, the code scrolled rapidly in green text. Target acquired system check. Error simulation detected. Redirecting to sandbox. He missed, I said. He is attacking a mirror, a digital ghost. The hangar doors on the right side of the screen burst open. The sound of flashbangs came through the audio feed. A dull thump-thump. Agents in tactical gear swarmed into the frame. FBI hands in the air now. The shout was audible in the auditorium. Harlan Voss stood up, his hands trembling as he raised them above his head. He looked at the laptop screen one last time. He looked right at me, and in that moment, he knew. He knew he hadn't just lost. He knew he had been outplayed by the emotional daughter he had despised. Get him out of here, I said, on screen. Harlan was slammed against the desk and cuffed. In the auditorium, the spell broke. People were on their feet, but the show wasn't over. And as for his accomplice, I said, looking down at the third row, 2 men in suits walked out from the side doors of the auditorium. They weren't security. They were federal agents. They walked straight to Gerald Brock. Gerald didn't fight. He didn't run. He just slumped, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume that didn't fit. He held out his wrists. The click of the handcuffs was lost in the cacophony of camera shutters firing like machine guns. The flashbulbs were blinding. The noise was a physical wave of sound shouts, questions, gasps. I stood alone at the podium. I felt light, the weight that had been crushing me for months, the doubt, the fear. The shadow of my father was gone. I looked at the chaos I had orchestrated. I looked at the empty seat where Gerald had been. I looked at the screen where Harlan was being dragged away. I leaned into the microphone one last time. My ex and her husband demanded half of my $500 million company, I said, my voice steady and final. They burned what they thought was mine, but all they really did was light up every trap my father left for the wolves. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for questions. I stepped back from the podium and walked off the stage. The roar behind me was deafening. It sounded like the ocean crashing against the cliffs at Gray Point. It sounded like a storm. But as I walked into the dark wings where Evan and Priya were waiting, smiling through their exhaustion, I realized it wasn't a storm I had to fear anymore. It was the sound of the world finally seeing me. I walked past them, down the long corridor toward the exit, my heels clicking on the concrete floor. There was no sunset to ride off into. There were lawyers to call. There were board members to fire. There was a company to rebuild from the ashes of the truth. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in my father's shadow. I was casting my own. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through fire and betrayal, and I hope you felt every twist and turn along the way. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet room, on your commute, or maybe while working late like Caroline? Please let me know in the comments below so we can share this experience together. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people. Your support means the world to us.